Okay. So thank you all for joining us today for the VOCA Evaluation Committee meeting. This webinar will go over and hopefully assist you in understanding how to review an application for our VOCA grant award. So today's agenda includes a quick overview of VOCA, the review committee process. It'll go into some details about the application, score sheets, and then any sort of follow-up items. So what is VOCA? The Victims of Crime Act, or VOCA, was passed by Congress in 1984. Congress then established the Crime Victims Fund, which helps to fund the VOCA grant. It's generated from fines and penalties that are paid for by convicted federal offenders, and they do not come from state or federal tax dollars. The Crime Victim Fund is distributed by the Office of Victims of Crime through the Department of Justice. And this is a formula grant that's provided to states who apply for the funding. The VOCA assistance funding is available to states and facilitates the development of programs and provide direct services to victims of crime.
Sorry, I was trying to let somebody in. Okay.
So what does it look like in Nevada? Our total state funding amount this year is $11,131,000. And the purpose is to promote and support quality victim assistance service programs throughout Nevada. Our role here at DCFS is that we're the designated state administering agency that oversees the funding to subrecipients in Nevada. We're responsible for ensuring that our subrecipients meet eligibility and organizational requirements, that they meet the federal and state quality and compliance standards, that our subrecipients are also include or have a good tracking and reporting standards that they have to submit quarterly to us, and we have to ensure adherence to funding rules and regulations. So these are the four, I have to think of the correct name, priority victim populations for our VOCA funding. So 10% of the total funding will go towards domestic violence services, 10% goes to sexual assault services, child abuse, and then underserved populations. To be eligible for funding, agencies must provide direct services to victims of crime. They have to promote community efforts to aid victims and promote victim safety. We need our agencies to comply with civil rights regulations, maintain confidentiality as required by law, and also part of the federal requirements is have a unique identity, unique entity ID number, or UEI, which was formerly called a DUNS number. You might be familiar with that term. They have to be registered with sam.gov, and they have to help victims apply for the Victims of Crime Compensation Program if they need it. Agencies must utilize volunteers, and they cannot charge victims for VOCA-funded services. Some more eligibility requirements is to meet match requirements, and we'll go over the match math later in the presentation. They have to be operated by a public or private nonprofit organization. They have to have a record of effective service delivery for victims of crime in their community, and also provide meaningful access to services by limited English proficient individuals. That seems off, but through LEP, be able to translate services to those who have limited English. And at least 25% of the program's funding in the year of or the year preceding the award has to come from other sources. The usage of the VOCA funds is that they have to provide direct services and subrecipients must provide services to victims of federal crimes on the same basis as to victims of crimes under the state or local law. So before we go into allowable cost, some of the things to remember as application evaluators is ensuring that the agency provides information in regards to how they're an eligible agency to receive the funding. We want to make sure that they include all of the things that I just went through in the slides beforehand. And so we'll also be sharing a copy of this slideshow for everyone so that you can have that as, to take notes and to help you while you do your application reviews. It's really important that you are mindful and keep fidelity of the applications that you review. So if you score an agency a 5 because you couldn't see the area that had their UEI number, then you have to make sure you score that the same for all the applications after that. So now to move to allowable costs. I believe that our notice of funding opportunity, which was shared with all of you, but we can also reshare if you need it, goes into more detail for each of these bullet points, but some of the highlights is allowable costs for activities supporting direct services include immediate emotional, psychological, and physical health and safety, mental health counseling and care, legal assistance, forensic medical evidence collection examinations, transportation, public awareness, relocation, transitional housing, and things like that. For direct services, those can include coordination of activities, supervision of direct service providers, contracts for professional services, automated systems and technology, volunteer trainings, and restorative justice.
I believe we have a question. Do you want me to
Oh,
just interrupt you or
yeah,
okay?
go ahead.
I believe Kelly, if you want to unmute and ask your question, that'd be great. Thank you.
I apologize. I could probably wait. So Carla, you mentioned like if you can't see something like the UE number, so these applications weren't pre-vetted to determine if they met the MQs of direct services or anything first. So we'll be looking and checking off for all of those things during the
Yeah,
evaluation.
yeah. So you will be our second set of eyes um, to make sure that they have all of those pieces in there while you're doing your reviews.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Okay.
Okay, so now we go into administrative allowable costs. So personnel for direct services. So this is for only direct service staff providing services through the grants. Skill training for staff, any training related travel, organizational expenses, equipment and furniture, project evaluation, maintenance, repair, or replacement of essential items can be included. Now we go into the unallowable costs. So anything that includes lobbying, research and studies, active investigation and prosecution of criminal activities, fundraising, capital expenses, which includes property loss, real estate purchase, or mortgage payments, cannot be paid through with VOCA funds. The compensation for victims of crime, but the agency should be referring them to our compensation for victims of crime program so that they can apply there. Medical care, salaries and expenses of management. So this includes salaries, benefits, fees, furniture, equipment, and other expenses of executive directors, board members, and other administrators of that agency.
Are there any questions on allowable and unallowable costs? I believe that Summer has a question. Unmute and ask it. Thanks, Summer.
So it mentions the salary and expenses of management. Does that include like salary expenses for hiring victim witness advocates or things of that nature?
For recruitment efforts,
Yes.
I do not believe so, but we may have to follow up and double check.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question. Anybody else? I don't want to miss anybody in the chat or had their hand up. Okay. Excellent. Now let's move a little bit in the direction of the review committee and the process that we're about to engage in. Essentially, we wanted to give you a sense of what the flow looks like for our role in the NOFO process, which stands for the Notice of Funding Opportunity. The first one is the applications were received, and we did the first initial review to make sure that they met at least the baseline information that we requested, and then we moved those forward. Second is now we're meeting about the review process, the committee, and we will send these the reviews and the applications your way, and I'll share a more detailed timeline in just a second. All of us, you all, everybody, we evaluators review and score applications. We also assist in that effort. We have a conversation around the scoring. We have a scoring discussion meetings, and then everybody submits their score sheets. So again, when we come together and we meet around the scoring, that's an opportunity for everybody to ask questions, for us to engage each other, and to really see where this application falls in terms of the priority areas and how well they completed it. It's very robust conversation. And then based on that, we are asking that our evaluators not only recommend should they get any funding at all, but also the amount of possible funding. And so we are looking for but funding recommendations from you all. We also would like to say that some of this information, once senior administration makes the final determination on award amounts, the information and the applicants that move on to be subgrantees or subrecipients, all this information can become public law. I want to get the terminology correct, Carla. Can you step in? Public information, public notice? Sorry.
And now that you bring it up, my brain wants to not remember what it is.
Thank you.
It can be requested through a public records request.
There it is. Let me write that down. I always forget that term, public record request, right? And so everything that we have written, everything that we have discussed may be up for public scrutiny if that is the case. Okay, so when we approach, we really want to be objective. And so more on that in 1 second. And here we wanted to share a little bit more detail, sort of timeline of our engagement as the evaluation committee. Some of this is laid out in the email that you all received from me either yesterday or today, but here it's more of a table. And so today we are meeting about the evaluation committee orientation. Next, I sent everybody on this call some key forms that need to be completed and signed by yourselves, namely, we're looking at the member agreement. Then we're looking at the confidentiality statement. And last but not least, the conflict of interest. So take a look at them, review them, sign them. And then if you can send our way by this Friday, that would be great. If you need an extension, that's okay. Just make sure you send us an email and let us know. Second, we are working the rest of this week and tomorrow to put together the assignment packets. And so those will be sent out to everybody next Friday, COB, next Friday, March 8th. Already, I had to stop there. We're already in March. Okay, thank you. And then the evaluation period, this is going to be on our own, reviewing the applications assigned. We are thinking March 11th through approximately March 29th, about 2.5, close to 3 weeks, if we count the weekends. So that is what that is looking like. Then we come together again on the 1st and the 2nd of April. These will be a slotted agenda for these meetings. And so what that means is a week before, you all will get an agenda specifying what possible slot you have so that you can plan accordingly. And so we are looking for that Monday, the 1st of April, and that Tuesday, the 2nd, all-day meetings. Like I said, It is not required that you attend both days fully. However, you are more than welcome to join us if you choose to, but this is essentially for everybody to know what slot they've been given. And then I'll come together, you all submit, we all submit our final scoring sheets for posterity. We submit those, and then on the back end, the following week, we're going to take a look at all the funding, the math, do the formulas, play around with all the amounts, and then we're going to pass that on to administration for their final approval. And we are hoping to make the announcements of awards in late April. Any questions on the timeline?
We did. So Paula put in the chat, is the scoring discussion meetings going to be hybrid, like in years past? Or just virtual?
Right now, virtual. Down here in the South, there is no real meeting space to come in person. And up north, I am not sure, Carla, if you're going to open up for them to join you.
Yeah, so
Yes.
we can meet here in our Carson district, our central office, where we're located, and I have the conference room reserved. So anyone in the Northern Nevada area that wants to come in and be in person, we will be meeting in our conference room.
Thank you. Great question. Any other questions? I know that Carla already touched on this. And so just to review what are our roles and responsibilities, and some of this is outlined in the member agreement. Number one is to review and score each VOCA application diligently and objectively. And this is why we ask about the conflict of interest. Please let us know who you may have these relationships with, and we will obviously not assign an application related to that conflict of interest. Second, agree to abide by the confidentiality rules, and I think we all are professionals in the room, in the virtual room. And so this just means not having side conversations about what we're reviewing, or conversations with non-members of the committee, etc. So just to keep it to ourselves and just to this group, any questions that we might have, at least until all of it is completed and we submit our scoring final sheets. Attend any meetings if possible. I've said this in the email and we'll stress it again. If it's not possible for you to attend the meetings, or it's just life gets busy, please communicate with us and we will make alternate arrangements. But we do welcome you in whatever presence you make yourself. So thank you for joining us. And then the last bullet is to assist us, our team. Apologies for the double bullet right there. But I guess it is very important, right, to maintain the review fidelity, the fidelity of the process, the fidelity and the grace around us doing this work. So again, thank you so much. We wanted to switch gears ever so slightly and now share with you a little bit of what the VOCA application actually looks like. Like we said, we're going to send all the applications your way next week. And so just to give you a summarized version of what it looks like is there is an application checklist. They do not need to submit it. Some agencies do, but they do not need to submit it. This is more of a checklist internally for them to keep tabs on what they've submitted or not, a checklist. Second, section 1 is the application form, which gives us, if you will, the 411 information on the agency, what they're applying for, the amount, etc. So all the logistical pieces around it. Section 2 is a proposal summary, just to give us a bird's eye view of what they are proposing in the project. And then we get into sort of the granular pieces of the application. And we start with section 3 of the proposal narrative. And then we move on to section 4, the scope of work. And then section 5 is the budget, which consists of 3 individualized tabs. And then section 6 is the agency performance and self-assessment. Way this breaks down in terms of points. So the application form is 0 points. Proposal summary is 0 points, only because they will delve in deeper in the proposal narrative, which is section 3. As you can see, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, around 8 or 9 elements. I know I counted this, I just forgot. The first one is for the proposal is the overview. Second is the statement of need. Third is the services proposed. Fourth is the goals and objectives. Fifth is the availability and accessibility of services. Then we move on to the community coordination and collaboration. And then we move on to how they address vicarious trauma as a framework in the work that they do. And then last but not least, talking about sustainability. Then we move on to section 4, which is the scope of work, 30 points. And then we move on to budget. So the budget, like I said, is, I should have written that down as well. I apologize. It is composed of the budget narrative, the budget itself, the breakdown, and then also the budget match, VOCA. And then last but not least, we move on to section 6, which is the agency performance and self-assessment for 20 points for a grand total of 195 points possible. We wanted to share, we don't have the time to go into each of the elements in the scoring sheet, but we did want to show you and highlight what they look like once you get them. So essentially, these are Excel documents that will be emailed to you along with the application roster with the assignments that will be given to you. You will need a score sheet for each of the applications that you score. And remember to write notes. There's always a section for a note. There's a section for notes. Please feel free to write, if you wish, any comments or observations that you detected. Just not a word of caution, but just if we can be, the word escapes me. If we can just pay special attention to how we are recording notes, even how clear it is, because what happens is when we review your score sheets, we need to write down every single piece that you shared with us in case the applicant should ever want a copy of these reviewer forms, which is in their right to request. So please, if you do handwriting, let it be neat if possible, clear as possible, so that we are able to understand the writing and are able, therefore, to transfer it over to the final eval score sheets that we keep in-house. And so, oh, there it is, so we can provide feedback. So it's just essentially this. Each one of you will be assigned a reviewer number, so that none of this information or your feedback gets tied back to you necessarily. It's part of the confidentiality on both ends, right? The confidentiality around the applicants and what they submitted, but also the confidentiality around the work that we're doing and protecting ourselves. So there's a reviewer number, organization that's applying, and the amount requested. Then it goes section by section with a breakdown and the appropriate scoring points attached. That's what that looks like. And then, however, I do want to share this other screenshot at the bottom. What we've added, we're going to need your help specifically in one scoring the above portions. But towards the tail end of the score sheets, there are a couple of things that we need your help with. One, are you recommending funding? Yes or no? Are you recommending funding? And if so, can you help us by recommending a funding amount, right? And then if everybody could please identify one area needing improvement, but also 1 or 2 areas that are very powerful and are areas of strength for this application, right? Something that the applicants can look forward to, or if they choose to, better in for the next round of the VOCA NOFO. So just wanted to highlight these elements in the bottom, which we're relying on you to help us figure out some of that funding formulas and the awarded amounts. Are there any questions on the score sheets? If there's any questions, Carla, we are here. The GMU team is here to help anybody who has any questions. And in the process, I'm sure we will learn as well. And now let's move a little bit into the scope of work. The reason why the scope of work table is very important is because it provides us a clear and concise description of the services that will be provided with grant funding. It assists us, the Evaluation Review Committee, in understanding an agency's plan for the proposed use of funding in an easy at-a-glance format. It offers measurable deliverables, and this is important, right? Are they clear in what they hope to accomplish? And are the numbers they are proposing as metrics feasible, right? This helps us, the grants management unit, objectively measure if the program is meeting its goals and objectives. And does all of this speak to each other? Does the scope of work connect with the budget narrative and to the goals and objectives? Right? Or are they saying one thing in the goals and objectives, something different in the scope of work, and the budget doesn't even speak to any of that? All three need to be in conversation. Here's an example of what the scope of work table looks like. The reason wanted to highlight a couple of things in the VOCA application, we offer an example, and this is it, of how it would look like in completion. The idea is this. The idea is that they would enter their information, develop their own scope of work, and then we as reviewers would see none of the red lettering, right? Because the idea is they would have entered their information. So as you can tell, we do target numbers, we do objectives, we do activities, and the documentation, which is attached. So when we're reviewing the scope of work, if they can be as clear and as precise as possible, that would be very helpful for us as evaluators. That's the scope of work. The budget, as I mentioned earlier, is made up of 3 tabs. One is the budget narrative. The other one is the budget summary, and the last is the match budget narrative. And we will share what those look like in 1 second. We do want to spend some time in highlighting some of these elements, and these correlate back to what Carla was talking about, allowable and unallowable expenses, especially around personnel and administration. So when we're looking at the budget, right, around, for example, personnel, which is a big category, please, again, be clear that it's for employees who provide direct services. They are identified in the budget narrative. Also in the NOFO, we did include sort of a distinction, a definition, if you will, to help agencies and applicants understand the difference between employees and contractual staff. Right? Those are different categories. And of course, they need to list the position. They need to provide a breakdown of the wages or the salaries, the fringe benefit, if they're going to pay that out. Make sure that the applicant attaches job descriptions, explains how the positions proposed are related or connected to the program that they are hoping to get funded. And only those staff whose time can be traced directly back to the grant can be listed in this personnel line item budget category. All of the other staff that cannot be traced directly to the program must be listed under indirect, if at all. Another category that we have here that we wanted to highlight is travel and training. So travel and training must show that wherever the applicant staff is traveling to, the costs must provide a direct benefit to this project. Who is traveling, to what purpose, the frequency, and any projected costs. And everything must go in terms of exceeding certain rates. It must be conferred and fall within the GSA allowable rates. So the travel in this category is usually for the staff. for the applicant staff to go to get trainings and do that kind of pieces. Now, in terms of what types of training is to identify and justify any training costs specifically associated with the program at hand. It has to tie back in. And so type of training, where it's going to be held, the number of staff attending, and the benefit to the project, right? They have to speak to each other. Other categories that are essentially line items in the budget is operating, right? Operating expenses, which may include tangible, expendable property, utilities, rent, general supplies, etc. And then equipment. So list equipment to purchase or lease costing sorry, I'm trying to read my note here. I can't see the rest of that. That does not directly list equipment to purchase or lease costing $5,000 or more. I can't read the rest. I apologize. My thing is right here. Okay. And the equipment that does not directly facilitate the purpose of the project or the program is not allowed. It has to be tied back into the actual functions of the program. And then it must be labeled. Any equipment must be labeled. It must be inventoried, because we do check this when we do our site monitorings. There are contractual and or consultant. These are project workers who are not employees. They need, the burden of proof is on the applicant to demonstrate and explain the need and or the purpose to hire a contractual or a consultant entity. Identify and justify these costs. Also, they must be clear in the method of selection, right? Is it competitive? Is it sole source, etc.? And any written agreements or contracts with all partners must be provided in the application. So if you get an application that says we are working with these following 3 consultants, thank you. And then there is no contracts that are signed, or in the case of partnerships with other agencies, MOUs, or anything that links this relationship, that we cannot give them full points for that budget area. And so other expenses are shelter costs, emergency client needs, and programmatic costs. In terms of indirect, which can be an area that can be a little tricky sometimes to figure out, indirect costs represents the expenses of doing business not readily identifiable or allowable, I can't say it, allowable and allowable to a specific grant. I apologize. I'm sure I butchered that word. And then subrecipients without a negotiated indirect rate may use a 10% rate. However, if an agency has a federally approved indirect rate, we will honor it, and the applicant must include a copy of the negotiated agreement with the application. So that's how the indirect looks like in terms of the budget narrative. This is what they look like, just to give you a visual. Of course, it'll be all completed. This is the budget narrative. If you see right here, it asks who will be working on this project, right? How much do they get paid? But how much of that percentage will come out of VOCA, right? Some salaries are 100% VOCA paid. Other ones are prorated, based on percentages. So make sure that we take a look at it and that all that is clear once they complete it. The budget summary looks like this, right? Whereas here we ask for more information. Here it's a quick snapshot of other types of funding sources that they have, and there is VOCA pending. But this gives us a generalized sense of other funding and funding pieces for their application. And the last tab in the budget narrative, the budget, is the match. Which is a big deal. So match is 20% of the total award. And so there's a formula around it. It was provided in the application, and so they figure it out and they submit that to us. All funds that are designated as much are restricted to the same uses as the subaward funds and must be expended within the grant period. And match can be non-federal funding, donations, and volunteer time as well. This is what that looks like. This is what the budget looks like. Like I said, it looks very, very similar to the regular budget narrative, but now this is the match for the 25%. Let me stop right there before we sort of spend the last 3 slides closing up our conversation and see if there are any questions regarding the pieces to the application itself. Oops, sorry, I was way in the beginning. Are there any questions on these sections? Everybody will get a copy. We'll get a copy of the slides for this PowerPoint. So everybody will have access to the same information. And you can always reach out to us with any questions if you're stuck on any one application or not know what's happening. And what we'll do is all the questions that come from you all, we will share with everybody else, as we know that maybe one evaluator might have a question and other ones also have as well.
I can also share the research we did in regards to the match calculation, because even though it says 20%, it's not actually just the 20% of the budget that they have. So the calculation, the number looks odd because we have to do that 80% in there. So I can include that in the information that we provide when we assign the applications to everyone. I think we got another question. How will we know if an agency has a federally approved indirect cost rate? So normally the agencies will let you know, and they have to provide a copy of that form that lets us know if it's federally approved or not. And so that's it's not too hard to identify. A lot of times it's our tribal agencies that get that federally approved indirect cost rate. And so if it's a tribal agency application that you're reviewing, you might want to check for that. But if it's not provided, then maybe they don't have it.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Any other questions? Do you see, Carla, that I may have forgotten? Thank you. Some helpful suggestions are to read through everything thoroughly. We are so many pieces and there's so many elements that we just ask to please just the due diligence around reading it thoroughly. Confirm that all questions are answered, especially those that carry a points to them, attached to them. MOUs. We are asking the agencies that they utilize the most updated with all the signatures if possible. It's a big difference if the MOUs were signed last week or a month ago or a year ago versus 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So let's see how recent those MOUs are. And then make sure that the data and the research the applicant is using is relevant and up to date. And these things came up as a result of previous no-flows, like lessons learned. And this is one of them, the use of data or research that is, and we know that data and research takes a minute to sort of gain currency, if you will, in our field. But if we are looking at somebody who's using census data from 2010, true story, in a previous NOFO versus available data from 2020, right? We're looking at, that's a huge discrepancy in terms of times. So please, as relevant and up to date as possible, that let's keep our eyes open for that. If you are interested in just growing in this or want more information regarding this whole NOFO process or just anything related to VOCA, we have provided 2 resources. Please feel free. One of them is the OVC website, and then there's additional resources just to enhance our knowledge base around the VOCA procedures and processes. However, we can also send your way. Sort of, we have cheat sheets of allowable and unallowable costs connected to VOCA. We can make sure that you get those so they become little cheat sheets for you as you're reading what programs the applicants are proposing to deliver. So those are some helpful suggestions. Is there anything that I forgot, Carla, in terms of helpful
No, but we
suggestions?
have a question. Paula, do you
Yes.
want to unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. I'm using 2 different ways to attend this today, so sorry.
Yes.
I just wanted to mention with the MOUs, some MOUs may look like they're signed a while ago, but they're actually still active. I've seen MOUs that have a time frame attached to them saying that, you know, it's valid for a certain amount of time frame. And then the signature looks like it's, you know, an outdated signature. So I was just going to mention just to kind of keep an eye on that.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yes. Thank you so much. So where do we go from here after today? Well, this meeting is being recorded and it will be made available to everybody in attendance and those not able to attend for reference. And we'll get this out to you next week, hopefully whoever requests it. In terms of meeting dates, our next big meeting date will be Monday, April 1st. We're looking at a full day. Just by way of sharing, we received 58. I'll pause right here. We received 58 VOCA applications across our state. So we are thinking that the scoring discussion might take us a minute. So we're hoping for Monday the 1st, 9 to 12, 4:30 approximately, as well as Tuesday, same time range. This will be via slot agenda, which means that everybody will get a copy of the agenda a couple of days, maybe a week before we are to meet, so that you can see based on your availability where you fall, and then you can plan your days accordingly. And again, any conflicts of interest, any conflicts or scheduling, please let us know and we will try to accommodate you. Oh, this is what I was saying. So an agenda along with will come a week before, and it will let you know approximately the time frame for each discussion when it will take place. Each person who reviewed the application will talk about the strengths, the weaknesses, the funding recommendation, all the pieces. So the evaluators for that application will have approximately 15 minutes, so half and half, right? Depending on how many evaluators we assign per application. So we're looking at approximately 15 minutes for each agency. I want to pause here and say that if you've identified a conflict of interest, and for example, we're already meeting on April 1st or 2nd, and an agency who represents a conflict for you is up for review, we just ask that the evaluator excuse themselves and they leave the room or the meeting so that we can honor the confidentiality parameters of that conversation. During the time of the scoring discussion per agency, other reviewers may ask questions about the application, even if they did not review it. Those questions may come from us, from GMU, just to get a clearer picture so that we know what we're dealing with, but everybody's allowed to ask everybody questions. And then the Tuesday meeting, we'll have time to discuss overall funding if there is time. Otherwise, we'll just discuss the scoring, the final scoring matrices. This is our next steps moving forward. On that note, I would like to pause right here and see if there are any other questions that we could answer together. If there are not today, but you go home, you're working and you remember something, especially once you get your assignments, we are here for any conversation, any doubt, please reach out to us. Myself, Elena, as well as Carla, anybody on our team really, and we will try to get you the answer best we can. Here is our contact information. All of you already have our email and phone numbers, but here's that information again, should you choose to reach out to us. On that note, this concludes the pre-evaluation webinar. And we want to thank you so much. Any final thoughts or questions before we close it off?
Thank you.